Come on, come on. Cordelia slammed her palm against the steering wheel as the 1965 Aston Martin DB5 sputtered and died for the third time in 10 minutes. Rain hammered the windshield like bullets, and the narrow Connecticut backroad stretched endlessly into darkness. She turned the key again. Nothing but a hollow click. Her phone showed no signal, naturally. She'd taken this route specifically to avoid the main highways where paparazzi might spot her, but now that decision seemed monumentally stupid. The memorial event was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to restore this car to perfection, or Lysander's memory would be honored with some generic rental instead of the machine he died trying to protect. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a weathered sign through the downpour. Steelridge Auto Restoration, classic cars only. A single light glowed in the shop window ahead. Cordelia grabbed her leather jacket and sprinted through the rain, her designer heels slipping on wet asphalt. She pounded on the metal door until it swung open, revealing a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We're closed," he said, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. His steel-gray eyes took in her soaked appearance with obvious irritation. "My car died right outside. I need help. Try AAA in the morning." He started to close the door, but Cordelia wedged her foot in the gap. "Wait, you restore classics, right? I have a 1965 Aston Martin DB5 that needs complete restoration. I'll pay whatever you ask." That made him pause. His gaze shifted past her to the dark shape of the car barely visible through the rain. "DB5? What's wrong with it?" "Everything, apparently. Engine won't turn over, electrical issues, probably more. It belonged to my brother." Jasper Steelridge studied her face for a long moment. Wealthy clients weren't unusual, but something about this woman seemed different. Desperate. Real. "Name's Jasper. And you are?" "Cora." She extended a manicured hand. "Cora Hayes." The lie came easily. She'd practiced it a dozen times in the mirror, preparing for this moment when she'd finally escaped the suffocating world of board meetings and charity galas that had consumed her life since Lysander's death. Jasper shook her hand briefly, noting the softness that suggested a life without manual labor, but also the firm grip that surprised him. "All right, Cora Hayes, let's take a look at your brother's car." They ran through the rain together, and Jasper immediately went to work with a flashlight, popping the hood and examining the engine with the efficiency of someone who understood machines better than people. Cordelia watched him work, noting how his hands moved with practiced precision despite their size. "When's the last time she ran properly?" Jasper asked without looking up. 3 years ago. She's been in storage since then. Storage can be murder on classics if it's not done right. Fuel systems probably gummed up, batteries dead, could be serious corrosion in the electrical. He straightened, rain dripping from his dark hair. "This isn't a weekend project. You're looking at weeks of work, maybe longer." "I have 2 weeks. Not happening." Cordelia felt panic rising in her chest. This was the only shop within 50 miles that specialized in Aston Martins, and the only one far enough from Manhattan that she could work without being recognized. "I'll pay double your normal rate." Jasper closed the hood and gave her a hard look. "Lady, I don't care if you pay me in gold bars. 2 weeks isn't enough time to properly restore a car that's been sitting for 3 years. I won't put my name on shoddy work. Then work faster." "It doesn't work like that." The rain was lessening, but Cordelia was already soaked through. Her carefully styled hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her expensive clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin. She looked nothing like the polished heiress who graced magazine covers, and that was exactly what she'd hoped for. "This car means everything to me," she said quietly. "My brother died 3 years ago, and there's a memorial event in his honor. I promised I'd have this car there, perfect and running, because it was his pride and joy. It's the only promise I have left to keep to him." Something in her voice made Jasper reconsider. He'd heard plenty of sob stories from rich clients trying to rush jobs, but this felt genuine. The pain in her eyes wasn't the manufactured emotion of someone used to getting their way through manipulation. "What kind of memorial event?" "A charity drive for the Children's Hospital. Lysander started it before he died. Classic cars, antique show, auction. The DB5 was supposed to be the centerpiece." Jasper nodded slowly. Children's hospitals were something he understood. His younger sister had spent months in one before she died, and the memory still ached after all these years. "I'll need to see how bad the damage really is before I commit to anything. Full diagnostic, Engine tear down, electrical check. That'll take a day or two. And then you'll know if 2 weeks is possible. Then I'll know if 2 weeks is suicidal or just extremely stupid. Despite everything, Cordelia almost smiled. I'll take extremely stupid over impossible. Jasper wiped rain from his face and made a decision that would change both their lives. All right, Cora Hayes, we'll get your brother's car running. But I work alone, I work my way, and if you try to micromanage me, the deal's off. I understand. Do you? Because most people like you don't understand what it means to actually work for something. The comment stung because it was true, at least about the person she'd been before Lysander died. Maybe you should find out what kind of person I actually am before you decide. Jasper studied her face in the dim light spilling from his shop. There was steel beneath the refined features, something that suggested she might surprise him. We'll see. Bring the car around tomorrow morning at 8. And Cora? Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty. As he turned to go back inside, Cordelia called after him. If you fix this car, you'll have my eternal gratitude. Jasper paused in the doorway. Lady, if I fix this car in 2 weeks, I'll have earned a lot more than gratitude. I'll have earned a miracle. The door closed behind him, leaving Cordelia alone in the rain with her brother's broken car and the first real hope she'd felt in 3 years. Cordelia arrived at 8 sharp wearing jeans that cost more than most people's monthly rent, though Jasper didn't need to know that. She'd deliberately chosen her oldest pair in a simple black t-shirt, hoping to blend in. The effort was somewhat undermined by the fact that even her casual clothes were impeccably tailored. Ready to get dirty? Jasper asked, already working under the hood of the Aston Martin. More than you know. She wasn't lying. For the past 3 years, she'd attended endless board meetings where men in expensive suits discussed her father's company as if she were invisible. She'd smiled through charity luncheons where women gossiped about people's personal lives like it was a competitive sport. She nodded politely while Augustus Ravensmont explained why marrying Dorian Whitmore was the sensible choice for both their families. This greasy garage represented the first real escape she'd had since Lysander died. Jasper handed her a wrench. Start by removing the air filter housing. Carefully, Cordelia took the tool and began working, surprised by how natural it felt. Lysander had taught her basic mechanics when she was 16, insisting that anyone who drove a car should understand how it worked. Their father had been horrified, but their mother had defended the lessons as character building. You've done this before, Jasper observed, watching her confident movements. My brother taught me. He said wealthy people who couldn't change their own oil were just asking to be taken advantage of. Smart man. Cordelia paused, wrench in hand. He was. Everyone thought he was just another rich kid playing with expensive toys, but Lysander understood engines better than most professional mechanics. He could hear problems before they showed up on diagnostics. What happened to him? The question came casually, but Cordelia felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Car accident. Someone ran a red light and hit him. It wasn't entirely a lie. Someone had run a red light, though the circumstances were far more complicated than she was willing to explain to a stranger, even one who was helping her honor Lysander's memory. Jasper nodded and returned to his work. He understood loss, understood the way it could drive people to make promises they couldn't keep. When his sister Emma had been dying, he'd promised her he'd become a doctor, help other kids like her. Instead, he dropped out of medical school after the accident that changed everything and had spent the last 5 years hiding in this garage, fixing other people's broken machines because he couldn't fix what mattered. Tell me about the memorial event, he said, needing to focus on something other than his own regrets. Cordelia's face brightened. Lysander started it when he was 22. Classic car show, antique auction, all proceeds going to children's cancer research. He'd been volunteering at the hospital since college, and he wanted to do something bigger. She didn't mention that the hospital was the same one where their mother had been treated unsuccessfully for ovarian cancer, or that Lysander's dedication to the cause had been one of the few things that still made Augustus proud after years of disappointment in his son's lifestyle choices. Sounds like he was a good guy. The best. Cordelia's voice was soft. He would have loved this place. All these classic cars, the smell of motor oil and metal. He always said you could tell more about a person by their garage than their living room. Jasper glanced around his shop, seeing it through her eyes. It was cluttered and functional, filled with half-finished projects and tools that had belonged to his father. Nothing fancy, but everything had a purpose. "What would your garage say about you?" he asked. Cordelia laughed, the sound genuine and unexpected. "That I don't have one. I live in the city, and my father thinks parking garages are sufficient for vehicle storage. But if you did have a garage?" She considered the question seriously. "I think it would be organized chaos. Everything in its place, but the kind of place where you could actually work without worrying about making a mess." They worked in companionable silence for a while, and Jasper found himself stealing glances at her. There was something compelling about watching her work, the way she approached each task with careful attention despite having no real mechanical training. Her hands were soft but steady, and she didn't complain when motor oil stained her fingers. "Hand me that socket wrench," he said, pointing to a tool just out of reach. Cordelia leaned across him to grab it, and for a moment they were close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with the scent of motor oil. Something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Their eyes met for a split second, and Jasper felt something shift between them. "Here," she said quietly, placing the wrench in his hand. Her fingers brushed his, and neither of them moved away immediately. Jasper cleared his throat and focused on the engine. "Thanks." But the moment had changed something. The air between them crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the electrical problems they were trying to solve. "So what's your story?" Cordelia asked, settling back on her heels. "How does someone end up specializing in classic car restoration in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut?" Jasper's hands stilled on the engine. It was a fair question, but not one he was eager to answer. "Family business. My father started it. I took over when he retired." Another half-truth. His father had started the business, but he died 5 years ago, 2 months after the accident that had destroyed Jasper's medical career and any chance of the future he'd planned. The garage had been all Jasper had left, the only place where he could still feel useful. "And you've always wanted to be a mechanic?" "Not exactly." Something in his tone warned her off that line of questioning, but Cordelia was too curious to let it go entirely. "What did you want to be?" Jasper looked up from the engine, meeting her eyes directly. "Someone who helped people instead of just fixing their broken things." The honesty in his voice surprised them both. Cordelia felt something twist in her chest, recognizing the pain of abandoned dreams. She'd wanted to be an art teacher before Augustus had made it clear that Ravensmont children had responsibilities that didn't include finger painting and craft projects. "Maybe fixing broken things is a way of helping people," she said softly. Jasper held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he returned to the engine, but the walls he'd built around himself had developed a crack. They worked until the sun was high overhead, and by then they'd managed to remove half the engine components. Cordelia's clothes were streaked with grease. Her hair was escaping its ponytail, and she'd never felt more herself than she did in that moment. "Not bad for a beginner," Jasper admitted, surveying their progress. "I had a good teacher." Their eyes met again, and this time neither of them looked away. By the end of the first week, they'd fallen into a rhythm. Cordelia would arrive each morning at 8, work until late afternoon, then return after dinner for the night shift. Jasper had initially protested the evening sessions, but she'd convinced him that working under artificial light would help him spot problems he might miss in daylight. The real reason was simpler. She couldn't bear to go back to her sterile hotel room and pretend to care about the conference calls Augustus scheduled every evening to discuss merger details with Dorian's company. "Pass me the torque wrench," Jasper said, sliding out from under the car. It was nearly midnight, and they'd been working for 3 hours straight on the transmission. Cordelia handed him the tool, their fingers brushing in the exchange. These small moments of contact had become more frequent over the past few days, neither of them making any effort to avoid them. "You know, most people would have given up by now," Jasper said, positioning himself back under the engine. "This is dirty, exhausting work. Most people don't have a brother worth fighting for." She meant it, but the words also provided convenient cover for the real truth. She'd never felt more alive than she did in this garage. Every day she spent here was another day she didn't have to think about board meetings or wedding arrangements or the suffocating weight of family expectations. "Tell me about him," Jasper said. "Lysander." Cordelia leaned against the workbench, watching him work. He was fearless, not reckless, just unafraid of what other people thought. He did what made him happy, even when it disappointed our father. "Like what?" "He wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school kids. Our father thought it was beneath him. that he should focus on more important things. She paused, remembering Augustus's exact words. Ravensmonts don't waste their education on finger painting and story time. Sounds familiar, Jasper muttered from under the car. What do you mean? There was a long silence, filled only by the sound of metal against metal. Finally, Jasper spoke. I was supposed to be a doctor. Had it all planned out. Medical school, residency, pediatric surgery. My dad thought I was crazy for wanting to work on kids when I could make twice as much in plastic surgery. Cordelia felt something shift in her chest. What changed? Life. The word came out harder than he'd intended. Sometimes the universe has other plans. She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone warned her off. Instead, she changed the subject. Do you ever think about going back to it? Medicine. Jasper's laugh was bitter. Too late for that. I'm better with engines than people anyway. I don't think that's true. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. Maybe not, Cordelia said quietly. But I know you agreed to help a stranger restore her brother's car in an impossible time frame. That doesn't sound like someone who doesn't care about people. Jasper slid out from under the car and sat up, wiping his hands on a rag. His gray eyes found hers across the garage, and for a moment the air between them felt charged. What about you? He asked. What did you want to be before life got in the way? Cordelia hesitated. The truth was too revealing, too tied to her real identity. A teacher, actually. Art teacher. I wanted to help kids discover they could create something beautiful. Why didn't you? Family obligations. She picked up a wrench, turning it over in her hands. My father has very specific ideas about what constitutes a worthwhile career. And you just accepted that? The question stung because it hit so close to home. It's complicated when you're all the family someone has left. After Lysander died, I became the only one who could carry on certain responsibilities. Jasper studied her face, noting the tension that appeared whenever she talked about her family. What kind of responsibilities? Cordelia's stomach clenched. She was venturing into dangerous territory, close to revealing too much. Business things. Family expectations. There's pressure to marry someone my father approves of. Arranged marriage? This isn't the 18th century. Not arranged exactly, but strongly encouraged. His name is Dorian Whitmore. Our fathers think we'd make a good match. The name meant nothing to Jasper, but the pain in Cordelia's voice was unmistakable. And what do you think? I think Dorian is handsome and charming and completely wrong for me. But he'll make my father happy. And sometimes that feels like the only thing that matters anymore. Jasper set down his tools and really looked at her. She was perched on the edge of the workbench, oil stains on her clothes, hair falling loose from its ponytail, and she'd never looked more beautiful. There was something about her that drew him in, a combination of strength and vulnerability that made him want to protect her from whatever was causing that haunted look in her eyes. You don't strike me as someone who lets other people make her decisions. Maybe I'm not as strong as you think. Or maybe you're stronger than you know. Their eyes met and held, and suddenly the space between them felt too small and too large at the same time. Cordelia slid off the workbench, taking a step closer to him. Jasper, she said softly. Yeah. Thank you. For this. For helping me keep my promise to Lysander. I know you didn't have to take this job. I wanted to help. She took another step closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Why? Because you asked me to. The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. They were standing so close now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the mixture of motor oil and something uniquely him that made her pulse quicken. Cora, he said, his voice rough. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He leaned into the contact, his eyes closing for a moment. This is probably a bad idea, he murmured. Probably. But neither of them moved away. Instead, Jasper's hands found her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, questioning. She answered by threading her fingers through his hair and kissing him back with 3 years' worth of loneliness and longing. They broke apart slowly, both breathing hard. Cordelia rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. We should probably get back to work, she whispered. Probably. But they stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the dim garage light, surrounded by the tools and parts of her brother's car, both knowing that everything had just changed between them and neither quite ready to face what that meant. When they finally returned to work, Their movements were different, more aware of each other. Every accidental touch carried weight now. Every shared glance held promise. By the time they called it a night at 2 in the morning, the engine was nearly rebuilt. More importantly, something new had been constructed between them, something as delicate and powerful as the machine they were working to restore. The next week passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful deceptions. Cordelia had moved their evening sessions later, arriving at the garage after 10 and staying until dawn. She told herself it was to avoid the daytime heat. But the truth was simpler. She craved the intimacy of working alone with Jasper in the quiet hours when the rest of the world was asleep. "Hand me that socket," Jasper said, his voice muffled from deep within the engine bay. Cordelia reached for the tool, her fingers trailing along his wrist as she placed it in his palm. These small touches had become their language, a way of communicating what they couldn't yet say aloud. "The fuel injection system is nearly perfect," he said, emerging from under the hood. "Your brother knew what he was doing when he modified this engine. Lysander always said stock was for people without imagination." Jasper smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "I would have liked him. He would have liked you too. He always respected people who understood craftsmanship." They'd been having conversations like this for days, sharing pieces of their lives while carefully avoiding the larger truths. Cordelia had learned that Jasper's father had died suddenly, leaving him the garage and a mountain of debt. Jasper had learned that Cora came from money but felt trapped by family expectations. Neither had revealed the full scope of their secrets. "We should test the electrical system," Cordelia said, moving to the car's interior. She slid into the driver's seat, and Jasper leaned through the passenger window to check the dashboard connections. The position put them close together, his face inches from hers as he worked. "Turn the key," he said softly. She did, and the engine turned over smoothly for the first time in 3 years. The sound was pure music, the deep rumble of a perfectly tuned V12. "Oh my God," Cordelia breathed. "It's actually working." Jasper grinned, the expression transforming his entire face. "She's not ready for the road yet, but the heart is beating again." In her excitement, Cordelia turned toward him, forgetting how close they were. Their faces were suddenly inches apart, and the air between them crackled with the same electricity they'd just restored to the car. "Cora," Jasper said, his voice rough. This time, she kissed him first. It was different from their first kiss, hungrier and more desperate. 3 weeks of working side by side, of carefully controlled touches and loaded glances, had built something between them that demanded release. Jasper's hands found her face, his fingers threading through her hair as he deepened the kiss. Cordelia felt something break open inside her chest, a wall she'd built around her heart after Lysander's death finally crumbling. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Jasper rested his forehead against hers. "This is getting complicated," he said. "I know. I don't even know your last name." The comment hit like a cold splash of water. Cordelia pulled back slightly, the weight of her deception settling between them. "Does it matter?" she asked. It might. She wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to explain about Augustus and Dorian and the impossible position she'd been placed in since Lysander's death. But revealing her identity would mean revealing the lies she'd been living for 3 weeks, and she wasn't ready for this fragile thing between them to be destroyed by the reality of who she really was. "Some things are better left in the past," she said finally. Jasper studied her face, noting the evasion. "And some secrets have a way of coming back to bite you." Before Cordelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. "Where are you? Your father is asking questions. Call me immediately." Evangeline Silverbrook had been her personal assistant for 2 years, hired by Augustus to manage Cordelia's schedule and ensure she maintained appropriate appearances at social functions. Over time, she'd become something like a friend, or at least an ally in navigating the complex world of Manhattan high society. "Problem?" Jasper asked, noting her expression. "Work thing. I need to make a call." She stepped outside the garage, dialing Evangeline's number with shaking fingers. Finally, Evangeline's voice was sharp with anxiety. "Where have you been? Your father had me call your hotel 3 times today, and they said you haven't been seen since morning." Cordelia's mind raced. She'd been staying at a small inn 30 miles from the garage, checking in each night, but leaving before dawn to avoid questions. "I've been exploring the area. Research for the memorial event." "For 3 weeks?" Cordelia, your father is suspicious. He knows something is different about this trip. Different how? You've missed 2 conference calls with Dorian, postponed 3 charity meetings, and yesterday you didn't answer your phone for 6 hours. That's not like you. Cordelia closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her real life closing in. I've been busy with the car restoration. At a garage in the middle of nowhere? I looked up this Steelridge place. It's a one-man operation run by some mechanic. Why aren't you using a proper restoration company? Because this man knows Aston Martins better than anyone. The car will be perfect for the memorial. There was a pause, and when Evangeline spoke again, her voice was careful. Cordelia, please tell me you're not doing anything stupid. Define stupid. Getting involved with someone completely inappropriate while you're supposed to be planning your engagement to Dorian. The accusation hung in the air like a physical thing. Cordelia felt exposed, as if Evangeline could see through the phone to the garage where Jasper was waiting. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because you sound different. Happier, but also guilty. And you only sound guilty when you're hiding something important. Cordelia hated how well Evangeline knew her. I'm not hiding anything. Then come back to the city. Your father wants to have dinner tomorrow night to discuss wedding plans. I can't. The car isn't finished. Cordelia, listen to me very carefully. Augustus hired a private investigator this morning. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown, and he's worried you'll do something to embarrass the family before the engagement announcement. Cordelia's blood ran cold. He what? A private investigator. Professional, discreet, expensive. The kind who specializes in family situations. If you're hiding something, he'll find it. Through the garage window, Cordelia could see Jasper working on the engine, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse around them both. She thought about his hands on her face, the way he looked at her like she was the most important thing in his universe. How much time do I have? The investigator started today, maybe a week before he reports back with a full dossier on everywhere you've been and everyone you've talked to. Cordelia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 years' worth of careful behavior and dutiful daughter performance pressing down on her shoulders. I have to go. Cordelia, whatever this is, it's not worth destroying your future over. Dorian is a good match. Your father is trying to protect you. From what? From making the same mistakes your brother made. The line went dead, leaving Cordelia standing alone in the parking lot with the weight of her family's expectations crushing down on her. Inside the garage, Jasper was humming softly as he worked, completely unaware that their stolen moments were about to come to an end. She had 1 week before Augustus learned the truth about where she'd been spending her time. 1 week before her carefully constructed lie came crashing down and took Jasper with it. 1 week to decide whether she was brave enough to fight for something real, or whether she'd retreat back into the golden cage that had been waiting for her since the day Lysander died. The morning of what would become their last day of innocence, Cordelia arrived at the garage to find Jasper already working beneath the Aston Martin. The car was nearly finished, its engine purring with the satisfaction of precision engineering restored to perfection. Coffee, she offered, setting 2 cups on the workbench. Thanks. Jasper slid out from under the car, oil streaking his cheek. We should have her ready for a test drive this afternoon. Cordelia felt a stab of panic. Once the car was finished, she'd have no reason to stay. No excuse to keep living this borrowed life where she could be just Cora, a woman in love with a talented mechanic who saw her as more than a business asset or marriage prospect. That's wonderful, she managed. Jasper caught the hesitation in her voice. You don't sound excited. I am. It's just that once it's done, I'll have to go back to my real life. And what's wrong with your real life? Before Cordelia could answer, the garage door chimed as a customer entered. She looked up to see a man in an expensive suit examining the classic Mustang Jasper kept in the front bay. Can I help you? Jasper called out. Just admiring the workmanship, the man replied, his gaze moving past Jasper to Cordelia. His expression shifted from casual interest to shock. Miss Ravensmont, what are you doing here? Cordelia's blood turned to ice. Theodore Blackwell was a client of her father's company, someone she'd met at dozens of charity functions and business dinners. Someone who would absolutely report her location to Augustus within the hour. I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else, she said quickly. Theodore's brow furrowed. No, I'm certain. Cordelia Ravensmont, daughter of Augustus Ravensmont of Ravensmont Industries. We met at the Children's Hospital Gala last spring. You were wearing that stunning blue Valentino dress. Jasper's wrench clattered to the floor. He turned slowly to stare at Cordelia, his face draining of color. Ravensmont, he repeated quietly. Theodore, oblivious to the tension crackling through the garage, continued speaking. I heard about your engagement to Dorian Whitmore. Congratulations, though I must say this is an unusual place to find the future Mrs. Whitmore. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, Cordelia said, her voice barely steady. I was just having some work done on a car. Of course. Well, I won't keep you. Please give my regards to your father. The moment Theodore left, the garage fell into deadly silence. Jasper stared at Cordelia as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways he was. Cordelia Ravensmont, he said slowly. Daughter of Augustus Ravensmont. Engaged to Dorian Whitmore. Jasper, I can explain. Can you? Because right now I'm wondering what kind of game you've been playing with me for the past 3 weeks. It wasn't a game. Everything I told you about my feelings, about us, that was real. Jasper's laugh was bitter. Real? You've been lying to me about who you were since the moment you walked in here. Your name, your life, your engagement to another man. What part of that was real? Cordelia felt tears burning her eyes. My feelings for you. The way you make me feel like myself instead of some corporation's asset. That's real. And the rest? The billions of dollars, the family empire, the fiancé? Just minor details you forgot to mention? I was going to tell you. When? After we slept together? After I fell completely in love with a woman who doesn't exist? The words hung between them like a physical blow. Jasper had said he loved her, but his voice was full of betrayal instead of tenderness. I exist, Cordelia said desperately. The woman you've been working with, the woman you kissed, that's who I really am. No, that's who you pretended to be. The real Cordelia Ravensmont is engaged to marry a billionaire and runs in circles where people like me don't even register as human beings. That's not true. Jasper's expression hardened. Isn't it? 3 years ago, did you even know my name? Did you care what happened to the blue-collar workers whose lives got destroyed by your family's business decisions? Something in his tone made Cordelia's stomach drop. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, your family's company was involved in a corporate merger that required moving a manufacturing plant. Hundreds of people lost their jobs overnight. Do you remember that? Cordelia's mind raced. 3 years ago was when Lysander died, when everything in her life had changed. She remembered vaguely that there had been business complications, but she'd been too consumed with grief to pay attention to corporate details. I remember there were business changes after my brother died. Business changes. Jasper's voice was flat. Is that what you call it when your family's decisions destroy people's lives? Jasper, what does this have to do with us? Everything. He turned away from her, his hands clenching into fists. I was driving a delivery truck for that plant when it closed. Had been for 2 years, trying to save money for medical school. When your family shut us down, I lost everything. My job, my savings, my future. Cordelia felt the world tilting beneath her feet. I didn't know. It gets better. Jasper's voice was deadly quiet. After I lost my job, I took work wherever I could find it. Driving delivery trucks, moving freight, anything to keep paying the bills. 3 years ago, I was driving a truck full of auto parts down Route 84 when someone ran a red light. The blood drained from Cordelia's face. No, the other driver was in a classic Aston Martin. DB5, midnight blue. He died on impact. Stop. Cordelia's voice was barely a whisper. Your brother Lysander Ravensmont died because I couldn't stop my truck in time. I was the one driving the vehicle that killed him. The garage spun around Cordelia. She gripped the workbench for support, feeling like she might collapse. That's impossible. I've been living with it for 3 years. The guilt, the nightmares, the knowledge that I killed someone's brother. And now I find out that someone was you. Cordelia's mind reeled. The official police report had been clear. A truck had run a red light and collided with Lysander's car. The driver had been cleared of wrongdoing due to mechanical failure, but she'd never learned his name. Augustus had handled all the details, shielding her from what he called unnecessary pain. The brakes failed, she said numbly. The police said it was mechanical failure. They did fail, but not randomly. Jasper's voice was hollow. Someone cut the brake lines on my truck. I found out months later when I finally had the money to have it properly examined. The cuts were clean, deliberate. Someone wanted that truck to crash. Who would do that? I've been trying to figure that out for 3 years. Someone who knew my route, knew when I'd be on that road, knew your brother would be there too. Cordelia felt pieces clicking together in her mind, forming a picture so horrible she didn't want to see it clearly. Dorian. What? Dorian Whitmore. My fiancé. He knew about Lysander's schedule that night. He knew Lysander was driving to meet someone who had information about irregularities in the company's merger documents. Jasper stared at her. Someone was investigating the merger? Lysander had found discrepancies, forged signatures, falsified valuations. He thought someone was manipulating the deal to benefit themselves at the company's expense. And now you're engaged to marry the man who probably arranged both our family's destruction and your brother's death. The words hit Cordelia like physical blows. Everything made horrible sense now. Dorian's sudden interest in her after years of casual acquaintance. His patience with her grief. His willingness to wait for her to be ready for marriage. His insistence that they keep their relationship private until she'd recovered from her loss. He'd been planning this for 3 years. Killing Lysander, destroying the evidence, positioning himself to marry into the family and inherit everything. And she'd been helping him by falling in love with the one person who could expose everything if he ever learned the truth about who she really was. Jasper, she whispered. But when she looked up, he was gone. The garage door stood open, letting in the afternoon light that suddenly felt too bright and too cold. Cordelia was alone with her brother's restored car and the devastating knowledge that the man she loved had every reason to hate her, while the man she was supposed to marry had orchestrated the destruction of both their lives. Cordelia found Jasper at the lake behind his garage, sitting on a weathered dock with his head in his hands. The Aston Martin's keys dangled from his fingers, catching the late afternoon light. You left these, she said quietly. He didn't look up. Keep them. Car's finished. Job's done. Jasper, please. We need to talk about this. Talk about what? About how I've been sleeping with the sister of the man I killed. About how you've been lying to me for 3 weeks while I poured my heart out to someone who doesn't even exist. Cordelia sat down beside him, careful to maintain distance. I never lied about my feelings. You lied about everything else. Jasper finally looked at her, his gray eyes cold and distant. Do you have any idea what the past 3 years have been like for me? The guilt? The nightmares? I've relived that crash every single day, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. You couldn't have known the brakes were sabotaged, but you could have told me who you were from the beginning. Instead, you let me fall in love with a fantasy while you played out some rich girl rebellion. That's not what this was, wasn't it? Jasper stood abruptly, pacing to the end of the dock. You were engaged to another man the entire time we were together. Did you think I was some kind of amusing distraction while you figured out your real life? I was trying to escape my real life. Everything about my feelings for you is genuine. Your feelings? Jasper's laugh was harsh. You're planning to marry the man who orchestrated your brother's murder, and you talk to me about feelings? Cordelia felt anger flare in her chest. You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to discover that the man I'm supposed to marry is a killer? That the man I love was there when my brother died and never told me? I didn't know who you were. You knew his name was Lysander. You knew he drove an Aston Martin. In 3 weeks of working on his car, you never once thought to mention that you were there when he died? The accusation hung between them like a blade. Jasper's face went pale, and Cordelia knew she'd hit her mark. I thought about it, he said quietly. Every day? But how do you tell someone you're falling in love with that you were responsible for their worst nightmare? You weren't responsible. You were a victim too. Try telling that to the nightmares. Cordelia's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen to see Augustus's number. Her father had been calling all afternoon, undoubtedly prompted by Theodore Blackwell's report of her unusual location. I have to take this, she said. Don't let me stop you from reporting back to your real life. The bitterness in Jasper's voice cut deep, but Cordelia answered the call anyway. Father. Cordelia, where exactly are you? Augustus's voice was sharp with anxiety and anger. I'm handling the car restoration for Lysander's memorial. I know where you are. The question is why Theodore Blackwell found you in some mechanic's garage looking like you've been working manual labor. Cordelia glanced down at her oil-stained clothes, suddenly seeing herself through her father's eyes. The restoration required hands-on involvement. For 3 weeks? Cordelia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are things about this family's business that you don't understand, dangerous things. Your behavior lately has attracted the wrong kind of attention. What kind of attention? The kind that could get you killed, just like it got Lysander killed. The words hit Cordelia like ice water. What are you saying? I'm saying that your brother's death wasn't random, and your recent disappearance has certain people nervous. People who have invested considerable effort in maintaining the current status quo. Cordelia felt the pieces clicking together. Dorian, among others. Cordelia, I need you to come home immediately. Tonight. We're announcing your engagement to Dorian tomorrow at the Children's Hospital Gala. The same event where you're supposed to present Lysander's car. I can't do that. You can and you will. This engagement isn't just about your future anymore. It's about your survival. The line went dead, leaving Cordelia staring at her phone in horror. Jasper was watching her with an unreadable expression. Let me guess, he said. Daddy wants his little princess to come home and play the part. You don't understand. My father just implied that my life is in danger. From who? Your loving fiancé? Yes, actually. Cordelia stood, her mind racing. Dorian killed Lysander to prevent him from exposing the merger fraud. Now he's manipulating my father into forcing this engagement to cover his tracks. And you're going to let him. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Cordelia. The question is whether you're brave enough to make the hard one. The hard choice? You mean like telling someone the truth about being involved in their brother's death? That kind of hard choice? Jasper flinched, but his voice remained steady. I made my choice 3 years ago when I decided to live with the guilt instead of trying to find out who was really responsible. But you don't have to make the same mistake. What are you talking about? I'm talking about fighting back instead of rolling over and accepting what other people decide for you. Your brother died trying to expose the truth. Are you really going to honor his memory by marrying his killer? Cordelia felt tears burning her eyes. If I don't, Dorian will destroy my father's company and probably kill us both. Maybe. Or maybe he's been counting on you being too scared to fight back. And what would you have me do? Run away with you? Live happily ever after while ignoring the fact that you were there when Lysander died? I'm not asking you to run away with me. Jasper's voice was quiet, resigned. I'm asking you to fight for your brother's memory instead of betraying it. Don't talk to me about betraying Lysander's memory. You've been lying to me for 3 weeks. And you've been lying to yourself for 3 years. The words hung between them like a challenge. Cordelia felt the weight of 3 years' worth of grief, guilt, and carefully managed expectations pressing down on her shoulders. I have to go, she said finally. I know. She turned to leave, then stopped. Jasper, for what it's worth, I never meant for any of this to happen. Neither did I. She walked away without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared into the trees. Behind her, the restored Aston Martin sat in the garage like a monument to broken promises and shattered trust. 3 hours later, Cordelia was back in Manhattan, sitting in her father's study while he and Dorian planned her engagement announcement. She wore the mask of dutiful daughter with practiced ease, nodding at appropriate moments while her mind remained at the lake where she'd left the only man who'd ever made her feel truly alive. Tomorrow, she would stand beside Dorian and smile for the cameras while he claimed her as his prize. Tomorrow, she would let Lysander's killer win because it was easier than fighting a battle she wasn't sure she could survive. But tonight, she allowed herself to mourn for more than just her brother. Tonight, she grieved for the woman she'd been in Jasper's garage, the woman who'd believed love might be enough to overcome the weight of family obligation and inherited guilt. Tomorrow, that woman would cease to exist, buried as completely as the brother she'd failed to save and the love she'd been too afraid to fight for. 2 months later, Jasper still woke up every morning thinking about Cordelia's hands covered in motor oil, the way she'd laughed when the Aston Martin's engine had first turned over, the taste of her lips in the dim garage light. 2 months, and the ache hadn't lessened. He'd tried to lose himself in work, taking on more restoration projects than he could reasonably handle. Classic Mustangs, vintage Corvettes, anything that would keep his hands busy and his mind off the woman who'd torn his world apart twice over. But every tool reminded him of her presence. Every engine sound echoed with her voice. The investigation had become his obsession. What had started as a desperate need to understand the truth about Lysander's death had evolved into something more systematic. Jasper had compiled files, tracked down witnesses, spent sleepless nights following paper trails that led deeper into a conspiracy that seemed to touch every aspect of both their lives. This morning, he'd finally found what he was looking for. "You're absolutely certain?" Jasper asked, studying the nervous man across from him in the diner booth. Eddie Torino had been the night shift supervisor at Murphy's Auto Repair 3 years ago. He was also the mechanic who'd sabotaged Jasper's truck, though it had taken 2 months of searching and a considerable cash payment to get him to admit it. "I told you already," Eddie said, glancing around the empty diner. "Some guy paid me $5,000 to cut your brake lines. Said it was for insurance fraud, that you were in on it." "What guy?" "Blonde, expensive suit, talked like he owned the world. Said his name was Whitmore." Jasper's hands clenched around his coffee cup. "Dorian Whitmore. That's the one. He knew your route. Knew when you'd be on Route 84. Had it all planned out. He paid you to cause an accident that killed someone." Eddie's face went pale. "He said nobody would get hurt. Said you'd have a minor crash, collect insurance money, and everybody would win. I never knew someone was going to die. But you took the money anyway. I needed the cash. My kid was sick. Medical bills were piling up. $5,000 seemed like a miracle." Eddie's voice broke. "I've been living with it for 3 years, man. Every day I think about that poor bastard who died because I was desperate." Jasper felt a familiar surge of rage, but it was directed at Dorian now instead of himself. For 3 years, he'd carried the guilt of Lysander's death, believing he was responsible. Now he knew the truth. He'd been as much a victim as Lysander, just another pawn in Dorian's larger game. "I need you to sign a statement," Jasper said. "A confession detailing exactly what Dorian paid you to do." "Are you crazy? That guy's connected. He'll have me killed. He's going to have people killed anyway if we don't stop him." Eddie studied Jasper's face, seeing something there that made him reconsider. "You really think you can take down someone that powerful?" "I have to try." An hour later, Jasper sat in his truck outside the diner with Eddie's signed confession, his phone, and a decision that could destroy what was left of his life. He dialed Cordelia's number, the same number he'd been staring at for 2 months without the courage to call. "Hello." Her voice was different, flatter than he remembered. "It's Jasper." There was a long silence. "I can't talk to you. Dorian killed your brother. I have proof." Another silence, longer this time. "Where are you?" "Murphy's Diner on Route 9. Can you meet me?" "I can't be seen with you. Dorian has people watching me." "Then we need to be careful. There's a storage facility on Elm Street, Unit 47. I'll meet you there in an hour." The line went dead. Jasper stared at his phone, wondering if she'd show up or if 2 months of living as Dorian's fiancée had finally broken whatever connection they'd shared. 50 minutes later, he was waiting in the storage unit when Cordelia slipped inside. She looked thinner than he remembered, her face pale and drawn. The expensive clothes and perfect makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "You look terrible," he said without thinking. "Thank you. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." Despite everything, Jasper almost smiled. "I meant you look tired." "I am tired. I'm tired of pretending to love a man who makes my skin crawl. I'm tired of planning a wedding that feels like my own funeral. I'm tired of living a life that isn't mine." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because the alternative is watching my father's company collapse and probably getting us both killed in the process." Cordelia's voice was bitter. "Dorian made it very clear what happens to people who cross him." Jasper pulled out Eddie's confession and handed it to her. "Read this." Cordelia scanned the document, her face growing paler with each line. "Oh my God, he planned it all. The sabotage, the crash, your brother's death. It was never about the merger money. It was about eliminating the one person who could expose him and positioning himself to inherit everything through marriage. I knew he was manipulative, but this..." Cordelia's hands shook as she held the paper. "This is premeditated murder." "It gets worse." Jasper took a deep breath. "I think your assistant Evangeline is working for him." "That's impossible. Evangeline has been with me for 2 years." "Exactly. Right around the time Dorian started showing interest in you. How else would he know your schedule so precisely? How else would he know you were at my garage?" Cordelia's face went white. "She told him about us." "Probably. And if she's been reporting to him for 2 years, she knows everything about your family's business, your father's vulnerabilities, your daily routines. Which means Dorian knows I'm here right now. Maybe. Or maybe Evangeline thinks you're at the spa appointment she scheduled for you this afternoon." Cordelia stared at him. How do you know about my spa appointment? Because I've been watching Dorian's operation for 2 months. I know he has you followed. I know your schedule is monitored, and I know he's planning something big for after the wedding. What kind of something? Jasper hesitated, then decided she needed to hear the truth. I think he's planning to kill you once the marriage gives him legal control of your father's company. Make it look like an accident, probably within the first year. Cordelia sank onto a nearby crate, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. So my choices are marry him and die, or refuse and watch him destroy everything Lysander died trying to protect. There's a third option, which is, we fight back, together. Cordelia looked up at him, seeing the determination in his gray eyes. Jasper, I can't ask you to risk your life for this. You've already lost everything because of my family. I lost everything because of Dorian, not because of you. And I've spent 2 months investigating this conspiracy. I'm not walking away now. Even after everything that's happened between us. Jasper was quiet for a long moment. What happened between us doesn't change what's right. Your brother died trying to expose the truth. The least I can do is help finish what he started. And if we fail, then we fail together. But if we don't try, Dorian wins everything. Your family's company, your life, and your brother's memory. Cordelia studied his face, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the hurt and anger. What do you need me to do? First, we need to find out where Lysander hid his evidence. It wasn't in the car, and it wasn't in any family property Dorian would have access to. How do you know it wasn't in the car? Because I went through every inch of that Aston Martin during the restoration. If there was anything hidden there, I would have found it. Cordelia thought for a moment. Lysander had a workshop, a place he went to work on his investigations, away from the family office. Father thought it was just another one of his hobbies. Where? About 20 minutes from here. An old garage he rented under a fake name. Can you get us inside? I still have his keys. Jasper stood, feeling the first real hope he'd experienced in 2 months. Then that's where we start. As they prepared to leave the storage unit, Cordelia caught his arm. Jasper, about what happened between us. We don't have to talk about that now. Yes, we do. I need you to know that every moment we shared was real for me. The lies were about my name and my circumstances, but never about my feelings. Jasper looked down at her hand on his arm, remembering how perfectly it had fit there during those stolen weeks in his garage. I know, and I need you to know that finding out who you really are didn't change how I feel about you. It just made everything impossible. Maybe it doesn't have to be impossible. One crisis at a time, Cordelia. The sound of her real name on his lips sent a shiver through her. For the first time in 2 months, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this nightmare that didn't end with both of them destroyed. Together, they stepped out of the storage unit and into the afternoon light. 2 people who had every reason to hate each other, choosing instead to trust each other with their lives. Lysander's secret workshop was hidden in an abandoned industrial complex 20 minutes outside Hartford. The building looked like it had been empty for years, which Cordelia realized was probably the point. Her brother had always been careful about keeping his investigations separate from family property. Unit 12B, she said, checking the key ring as Jasper picked the lock on the outer door. The hallway inside was dark and dusty, but Lysander's workshop showed signs of recent use. Cordelia's heart clenched as she recognized his handwriting on labels, his methodical organization of files and equipment. He was more paranoid than I thought, Jasper said, examining the multiple locks on the workshop door. Lysander always said that people who underestimated corporate espionage usually ended up dead or bankrupt. The workshop itself was a revelation. 3 walls were covered with documents, photographs, and flowcharts mapping out Dorian's conspiracy. Bank records, forged signatures, timeline analyses, and detailed evidence of the merger fraud that had destroyed Jasper's life and cost dozens of families their livelihoods. Jesus, Jasper breathed, staring at a photograph of himself taken outside the Murphy's auto repair shop 3 years ago. He was investigating the sabotage. Cordelia moved to a wall dedicated to Dorian's psychological profile. Her brother had documented years of manipulative behavior, financial crimes, and suspicious accidents involving people who had crossed him. Look at this, she said, pointing to a timeline. Dorian started positioning himself for our family's company 5 years ago. He eliminated 3 potential business partners before he decided marriage was a more efficient strategy. Eliminated how? Car accidents, house fires, convenient heart attacks, all ruled accidental or natural causes. Jasper studied the evidence wall, feeling pieces click into place. Your brother was building a criminal case. This isn't just business fraud. This is serial murder. And we're next on the list. Cordelia's voice was grim. Once Dorian gets legal control through marriage, he won't need to keep either of us alive. They spent the next hour photographing documents and copying files to multiple drives. The evidence was overwhelming, more than enough to send Dorian to prison for life and clear Jasper of any responsibility for Lysander's death. This changes everything, Jasper said, downloading the last batch of files. With this evidence, we can destroy him. If we can get it to the right people without being killed first. As if summoned by her words, they heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Multiple sets, moving with purpose toward their location. Time to go, Jasper said, grabbing the drives and moving toward a back exit Lysander had wisely included in his workshop design. But they were too late. The door burst open, revealing Dorian Whitmore flanked by two men who looked like professional security. Behind them, Evangeline Silverbrook stepped into view, her expression a mixture of triumph and regret. "Hello, darling," Dorian said to Cordelia, his voice sickeningly sweet. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Evangeline," Cordelia said, her voice hollow with betrayal. "How long?" "From the beginning," Evangeline replied. "I'm sorry, Cordelia. I actually grew to like you, but business is business." Dorian moved deeper into the workshop, examining Lysander's evidence wall with obvious admiration. "Your brother was quite thorough. It's a shame he never got to see his work completed." "You murdered him," Jasper said, his voice deadly quiet. "I eliminated a problem," Dorian corrected. "Just like I'm about to eliminate 2 more problems." "People know where we are," Cordelia lied. "If anything happens to us, this evidence goes directly to the FBI." Dorian smiled, the expression cold and predatory. "Nice try, but Evangeline has been monitoring your communications for months. No one knows you're here except us." Jasper's hand moved slowly toward the tool belt he still wore from his garage days. Among the wrenches and screwdrivers was a small device he'd hoped never to use, a panic button that would simultaneously alert police and upload all their gathered evidence to a cloud server. "You know," Dorian continued, "I really did hope we could do this the easy way. A nice wedding, a happy marriage, a convenient accident 6 months later. But you had to make it complicated. By falling in love with someone who wasn't you." Cordelia's voice was defiant. "By thinking you were smart enough to outmaneuver me." That was when Jasper pressed the panic button. Alarms immediately began blaring throughout the building, and somewhere in the distance they could hear sirens approaching. Dorian's face contorted with rage as he realized what had happened. "You think you're clever?" he snarled, pulling a gun from his jacket. "I'll kill you both right here and claim self-defense." "With what story?" Jasper asked, moving protectively in front of Cordelia. "That you just happened to find us in your murder victim's secret workshop full of evidence proving you're a serial killer?" The sirens were getting closer. Dorian's men looked nervous, glancing toward the exits as if calculating their chances of escape. "Sir," one of them said, "we need to go. Now." But Dorian was beyond rational thought, consumed by 3 years of careful planning unraveling in a single afternoon. "I've worked too hard for this to let some grease monkey mechanic destroy everything." He raised the gun, but Cordelia stepped beside Jasper instead of behind him. "If you kill us, you'll never get the company," she said calmly. "My father will fight you in court for decades. You'll get nothing but a murder conviction. I'll take my chances." The workshop door exploded inward as FBI agents stormed the room. In the chaos that followed, Dorian's gun went flying. His men surrendered immediately, and Evangeline began crying as she realized her carefully constructed life was collapsing around her. Cordelia Ravensmont, the lead agent, approached them. "We received an emergency signal from this location along with a data dump containing evidence of multiple federal crimes." 6 hours later, Jasper and Cordelia sat in a federal building watching through one-way glass as Dorian was interrogated. The man who had seemed so powerful and untouchable now looked small and desperate, his lawyers scrambling to contain a case that was already making national headlines. "It's over," Cordelia said quietly. "Yeah." Jasper took her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture felt even after everything they'd been through. Your father called while you were giving your statement. He wants to see you. What did you tell him? That you'd call him when you were ready. They sat in comfortable silence, processing the events of the day. Dorian would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. Evangeline had agreed to testify against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. The evidence Lysander had gathered would exonerate dozens of people whose lives had been destroyed by Dorian's schemes. Jasper, Cordelia said finally. Yeah. When this is all over, when the trials are finished and the media circus dies down, what do you want to do? He considered the question seriously. I want to go back to my garage and restore classic cars. Maybe expand the business, hire some help, build something good instead of just fixing what's broken. That sounds perfect. What about you? What does Cordelia Ravensmont want to do when she's finally free to choose? She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. I want to teach art to kids who think they can't create anything beautiful. And I want to help run a classic car restoration business with the most talented mechanic I know. Sounds like a plan. Are you sure? After everything that's happened, all the lies and complications and family drama? Jasper brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Cordelia, I fell in love with you when I thought you were a mysterious woman named Cora who appeared in my garage during a thunderstorm. Finding out you're actually a billionaire heiress with complicated family issues doesn't change how I feel about you. Even though I lied to you, even though you were trying to protect yourself from a situation you didn't fully understand. He paused. Besides, you fell in love with me thinking I was just a mechanic. Finding out I was involved in your brother's death could have changed everything for you. But it didn't. No, it didn't. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the federal building buzzed with activity as agents and prosecutors built their case. But for a moment, they were alone in their own private world. 3 months later, Lysander's memorial event finally took place. The restored Aston Martin was the centerpiece of a car show that raised $2 million for children's cancer research. Cordelia stood beside the car in a simple blue dress, no longer hiding behind false names or manufactured personas. He would have loved this, Augustus Ravensmont said, joining his daughter beside his son's car. The revelation of Dorian's crimes had shattered him, but it had also freed him to grieve properly for the first time in 3 years. Yes, he would have, Cordelia agreed. Across the lawn, Jasper was talking to a group of young people about engine restoration, his face animated with the passion that had first drawn her to him. When he caught her eye, he smiled and mouthed, I love you. He's a good man, Augustus observed. The best. I misjudged him. I misjudged a lot of things. Cordelia took her father's arm. We all did, but we have a chance to do better now. As the sun set over the memorial event, Cordelia walked toward the man she loved, ready to build a life based on truth instead of lies, on love instead of obligation, and on the promise that sometimes the most broken things could be restored to something even more beautiful than they were before. The Aston Martin's engine purred to life behind them, a symphony of perfectly tuned metal and rekindled hope, carrying the memory of one brother's courage and the promise of 2 hearts finally free to love without reservation.